Okay, welcome to Jay County Broadband Fireside number two. I'm Travis Richards with Jay County Development, and with me is Gary. I'll let you introduce yourself, Gary.
Yep, my name is Gary Thompson. I'm an AmeriCorps service member serving in the East Central Indiana region for the East Central Indiana Regional Planning District based in Muncie. And my project scope has been mostly broadband and digital inclusion. So the agenda we'll kind of talk about today is first we're going to go over the BEAD program. It's a big broadband program, funding program that's coming up here soon in the next couple of years. So I wanted to go over it, explain what it is, how it'll be implemented into the region or for the state in general. Then we'll be talking about the state of broadband in Jay County right now and maybe some barriers that Jay County has encountered so far with broadband build out and broadband adoption and all of that. Um, we may tell you guys a couple of personal stories about encountering some of those barriers as well, just to kind of hit the nail on the head and drive the point home. And then kind of end on a brief discussion on why the B program will hopefully help Jay County and other counties in this region with those types of barriers and hopefully solve them in the near future. So I guess we'll kind of start here with what I said, what the B program is, how is it going to be implemented. So the B program is the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program. It's a nationally, it's a $45 billion program specifically geared towards broadband infrastructure. Indiana will be receiving, I think, 860 million of that 45 billion. So a lot of money, but for 860 million for an entire state to build out all of the sore spots where there are gaps in broadband access, um, can be stretched pretty thin. So there's a lot of planning that kind of goes into that process. The state is in the middle of that planning process right now. So we're in the first year of a 5-year plan for the BEAD program, with the next few years being that implementation phase. So the how that funding will kind of get to the region or to the county is I believe internet service providers will be the ones applying to some grant program that gets set up from that money. And then those ISPs will come to the respective counties with these projects in mind that they want to do and that backing from the BEAD funding. So with that being said, Travis, what's kind of the state of broadband in Jay County to your knowledge right now? Um, and I guess we'll just start with that.
I mean, it's fantastic. I've never heard anyone say that they've got slow speeds or dropped internet anywhere.
Right.
No, no. I mean, we are very similar to most rural parts of Indiana.
Mhm.
Within city and town borders, you have anywhere from marginal to very good access typically, and then once you get past corporate boundaries, it starts to drop off pretty steeply. And there are some
Mhm.
areas in the county where you have no service or extremely limited or slow service in some areas. I mean, there's even areas
Right.
where mobile service is almost non-existent in parts of the county, which is, crazy to think we can talk to satellites how many miles in orbit, but we can't talk to each other just across the county here.
Right. Right. Right.
Um, you mentioned we might tell a personal story or two, and I'm glad you did because I know everyone in the county's on the edge of their seat waiting to hear more about what you and I do in our free time. But um, I guess, at home, we have been pretty limited in our internet access. And so we
Mhm.
use satellite internet, which is okay. It works reasonably well, all things considered, but it has its drawbacks. You're not wired, and so weather can sometimes cause issues. Heavy traffic can cause issues sometimes, and so there's certainly drawbacks to it. Um,
Mm.
but we're grateful that it's there because otherwise we may not have any other options.
Right.
And so it's it's interesting to think about the speeds that are going to be required, I think, through the BEAD program and the build out and everything, and what types of service can actually meet those requirements. And it seems like fiber is the one that hands down can pretty well meet all the requirements. There are some other technologies that can get close or that they're working on improving enough that they may be able to
Mhm.
use, but certainly fiber is that gold standard. But again, the cost is intense or exorbitant.
Mhm.
Um, we've heard estimates for running fiber throughout the entire county in the several tens of millions of dollars. And so it seems unlikely that that's going to happen here within the next couple of years. I guess in short, my answer is we're similar to most other rural counties in the state.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, like you said, it's a sentiment that's felt across the state, especially if it's a rural county. And I think kind of jumping ahead here a little, the B program is prioritizing uh, first unserved areas, so places without any service at all, and then next underserved areas, so places with lower than a specified speed to that household.
Mhm.
Um, so those will definitely be the first places that kind of get prioritized. And I don't want to misspeak here, but I'm almost positive that satellite technology is not considered a part of that broadband scope. So if you only have satellite, you would actually be considered not served because it's not served by the accepted broadband technologies of the state and the federal government. Um, so yeah, I mean, good news there. If that's true, I'm pretty sure it is. Um, the the region actually had a state listening session from the state broadband office and NTIA, which is the National Telecommunications and Information Association. Um, really, really big mouthful. And at that listening session, they did go over sort of who would be prioritized, why are they being prioritized, and so forth. So, Travis, actually, I don't know if you got that PowerPoint or not, but I have access to those slides. And it's been a couple of months now, and I think actually the BEAD funding has been announced since that PowerPoint or that presentation in this region has been given. So it's a little bit outdated, but for the most part, all of the requirements and all of that stand true. So if you don't have that already, I can give that to you, and then you can feel free to disperse that to whoever finds it interesting enough to and use it. So yeah, cool. I guess the next question, we kind of answered this a little bit. Are there any specific barriers that you've encountered living in Jay County? I don't live in Jay County or even the region, so I can tell, I think, a story that people can relate to, but not necessarily, can relate directly with your guys' region. So I'll let you go first and talk about your experiences, and then I'll hop in.
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind is we've seen the rise of remote and e-learning days in school, and this past winter when we had inclement weather, which love to have that. Uh,
Right.
but I had to bring the kids with me to work so that we could all get on the internet and they could get logged into their classes at the right time and do all
Right.
the things that they had to do. And so it made for a really interesting work day, chasing them around the conference room in the back of the building here, trying to make sure they were getting logged in and doing all the things that they had to do as
Right.
opposed to doing it from home. And
Mm,
certainly I understand I'm not the only one that may struggle with those things. And so, that's one of those most obvious and pressing issues for the families across the county. But
mm,
there's other things too, and I know how silly this sounds, but you think of all the streaming services and getting your
mm.
entertainment through the internet. But gosh, the internet goes out. What are we going to do? Are we going to have to talk to each other now? I mean, that sounds terrible, But and I say that in jest, but in
Right.
reality, many people depend on the internet for their entertainment and their
Mhm.
news, perhaps doctor's appointments. I mean, when you stop and think about all the things that depend on good connection and reliable connection, even like the smart technology that's in homes, you think about the Ring
Mhm.
doorbell or I've heard there are refrigerators that can keep track of what you need, and
Yeah.
I don't even pay attention because I, I've got enough people watching me. I don't need my fridge to watch me too. But
Right.
you think about those things and what do disruptions in your internet service do to those types of things, the smart devices in your home. And so
Mhm.
there's a lot of there can be a lot of angst if your coverage is unreliable or slow enough speeds that those things are not able to function.
Yeah, yeah, and I'll just quickly add on here. I know Jay County is mostly agricultural, and there's been a lot of like technological advancements in agriculture technology that rely on reliable broadband. So, and that's a an advantage that people could be um, taking into account for their work that, they may be being left behind on. And we definitely don't want people having to sell their farms because they just can't keep up with other farms outside of your communities who may have access to this type of technology. Um, we want everybody to thrive as much as possible. And then, on top of that, you mentioned, people rely on, their entertainment and all of that with broadband and uh, it's not only that, but also, connecting with people. For some people, I think mostly, the aging population, or just people with mobility issues. If you can't leave your house every day, and maybe you're alone at your house, how are you going to talk to people to interact with them? You start to get lonely, and I think that's also a pretty serious thing to take into account is people feeling lonely and maybe encountering mental health issues because they can't leave their house as often as they would want to or would need to. So I definitely agree. Yeah, it kind of is just becoming this pervasive thing that people. I mean, it's becoming a necessity, to be frank. We've had multiple conversations about how we think it should become a public utility and not necessarily an amenity that gets tagged on to houses after the fact. And I think it is becoming maybe a self-fulfilling prophecy in that sense, where we see it as a necessity, so it is becoming a necessity. And I do personally see that as a good thing because broadband is a wonderful tool to use. So
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we
Um,
we don't really think about electricity as a luxury or whatever. It is a
right.
basic requirement for a home these days, and it's
Mhm.
it'll be really interesting to watch the evolution of broadband and how, if we ever do get there to where it's a regulated utility. I'm just anxiously watching.
Right, right. Um, so I'll tell my personal story, and we'll kind of um, finish off here with any last thoughts with you, Travis, uh, and myself. I recently have had issues with internet as well. So I live in Fishers, Indiana, which is Hamilton County, and even in a county like that, um, I lived at an apartment complex where the highest speeds I could get were 50, 50 megabits of download speed, which for most households, I think the FCC in a study talked about how households should have at least 25 megabits of download speed per person. And just a little bit more just to have a little cushion between you and your limit, so to speak. Um, and me and my now fiance we both kind of work from home a lot of the time, and if we're both on a video call, it just cuts out. I mean, it definitely was not enough for two people. It was very expensive. I won't say who my provider was because I don't think I can. Um, but it was very expensive for what we were receiving. I think we were paying like $65 a month to receive this very low amount of service. And then actually recently, this past month, it shot up to $70 a month. And now that recently I've also moved, and we moved to this new place, and I have a completely different provider. I'm getting symmetrical 1 gigabit speeds for just $10 more. So, so it was like this weird, isolated case of bad internet in the city, where everybody in this apartment complex could only receive that service, that specific service, but everybody outside of that apartment complex had you know 3 or 4 options they could choose from, and a lot of different service plans they could take advantage of. So I think, that being said, I think that story kind of just emphasizes how important it is to not only to have affordable, robust internet, at your home, but just options, ways to get out of a service if it isn't what you need. So having multiple providers in the area, having multiple, plans to choose from, and not, just this budget option that ends up not actually being a budget option, in the sense of money. So yeah, yeah, very interesting stuff. Hopefully, the BEAD program will rectify a lot of those areas, though.
So one quick clarification, you say they were
Yeah,
recommending 25 megabit per person in the household?
yeah, yeah. So I mean, that's like the upper limits of what a person would use at any given point in time. So I think they did like, and I don't know how accurate these measurements are necessarily. I would trust that the FCC would do a trusted quantitative study.
Sure.
Um, but they found that video calls, so the one we're having right now, would take up about maybe 20 megabits per second of that sort of what do you call it, that I can't think of the word, the span, the
Oh, I don't know, but it would take up that much of the capacity that you have.
yeah, yeah, capacity, bandwidth, there we go,
Bandwidth, there
bandwidth.
you go. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so it would take up that much bandwidth just to have a video call. So if you have two people, that's roughly 40 megabits of download speed. So if you're only receiving 50 megabits to your entire house, and again, you're at any given point, you're receiving slightly lower than that because of XYZ. That's only like a 10, 8 megabit, space to kind of work with. So yeah, 25. But really, realistically, um, I would give every person like 30, 40, per person in a household just to be safe. Especially if you're doing video calls a lot, especially if you have kids who have to do e-learning. Um, it does, kind of go up a little because technology has advanced since that
Sure,
study.
sure.
So it requires more. We're requiring more and more speeds for everything to operate smoothly. So
I suppose doing some very simple math with six in my household at 25 apiece, it's no wonder that satellite internet maybe doesn't perform like you'd hope when everybody's using it.
right, right, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess you would have to have like what? You said you did the math?
Well, I mean, at 25 apiece, that's 150, and that's
Right,
just not, I guess I shouldn't say that's not achievable with satellite, but I don't believe we've ever gotten that.
right. Yeah, you've never received that. Okay.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
well, all right. So I think we've outlined that broadband's important. There's a needs. So let's talk just a little bit more about like the BEAD program and what it may be able to, how it may be helpful for Jay County.
Yeah. So, like I mentioned, the entire state of Indiana is receiving about $860 million. And that will have to be stretched to the entire state. And I know that, 860 million isn't not a lot of money, but for the entire state, um, if we have a lot of broadband build out that's needed, that money could potentially not go a long way. So one of the things that the state is trying to do right now, and what they're kind of going through plans for, is to figure out how to best use that money and stretch it as much as possible, and still give people that quality, a robust internet at affordable prices. Partnering with these local internet service providers, um, and having that grant program kind of filter down through those ISPs. So the B program is focused on infrastructure build out. So that's where all of the money is going. There is state digital equity money coming down as well. I think that's only a few $1 million though, and that will be focused on programs like computer access. So, if you have a library in your community, maybe helping that library buy computers for people to use, or just helping households get computers in general. Skills training, so workforce development programs that will help people be able to utilize the internet that is coming to your communities. Um, and then uh, I I mean that program can encompass a lot of things. You essentially just have to spin it in a way that makes sense in relation to broadband. Um, but in any case, the broadband build out, you know, the East Central region, Jay County will just have to find ISP partners that are, they're willing to see projects that maybe the county is wanting to do, or if they already have data, projects that they are wanting to do in the county. Working with them in tandem to find these priority areas that kind of encompass the unserved and the underserved. So again, we have that pyramid of priorities. So first goes the unserved, next comes the underserved, and it'll kind of work from there. And again, I think they're working on like a 5-year timeline. as you mentioned, is it actually going to be 5 years or is it going to be a little longer? I think a lot of people's guess is it's going to be a little longer than 5 years, but um, I think the plan is to have multiple regions of Indiana to kind of be building out, doing this type of work all at the same time um, through this 5 year process. So it's not just one big build out. Okay, wait a couple years, one big build out. It's kind of just we keep building and building until the goal of every Hoosier being connected is kind of realized. So, I mean, I kind of reiterated what the BEAD program is going to do. How can you see that fitting into Jay County? I know you mentioned, the environment's kind of the same um, as every other rural area of Indiana, but like, what do you see happening with that money in Jay County?
I mean, it's really one word, I think, and it's build out. It's
Yeah.
expanding the reach, getting reliable, high-speed broadband coverage to more residents. I don't know that you're going to hit everybody, but gosh, the farther you can expand, the better off you'll be. And
Mhm.
so, there's clearly no downside to any of that. And I can't imagine anybody's even going to question the federal government's handing money to the state and they're going to use it to expand broadband. Should we or should we not participate? I mean, it's a pretty clear, we're going to participate. Um, I guess one of the questions I have, and I know we're about out of time here, but what are some things that Jay County can do or the residents can do so that we can make sure we take advantage of the BEAD program and what's coming down the pike?
Yeah. So one of the most important things I think that I would say to Jay County or people in Jay County is that if you're in a position to start partnering with local ISPs that you know and that you trust will actually get the work done. So I know the region has had a lot of experience with ISPs who say they will get the work done and then end up just sitting on the money and nothing, comes to fruition. But finding those partners that are reliable and that will actually spend the money well and kind of in tandem with your county's community leaders' advice on where it should be spent. That's one of the most important things I think people in Jay County should be looking at again if they're in a position to do so. The other thing that I would recommend get signed up for the Affordable Connectivity Program. It's a federal program that grants a $30 discount to your internet service providers' service plans. Um, the service providers have to be participating in that program, and not everyone, all of them are. I do know most of the bigger ones are, so like the AT&Ts and Comcasts, and I think the an internet service provider that's wanting to come into your region is also participating in that um, um, mainstream fiber networks. So there are a lot, and most of them have plans specifically dedicated to the ACP discount. So I think it's Comcast who literally has a plan that is $30 and is the ACP um, plan or ACP sort of budget plan. And so that $30 would just basically cancel out and that plan is free. I think the $30 discount applies to all of their plans, but that's an opportunity to get free internet essentially. So look into applying to the ACP. It's a wonderful program. Hopefully it gets funded again next year. And I think people are pretty optimistic about that. And lastly, um, talk to local officials about and or participate in the Indiana connectivity program. So the last one was ACP, but this one is ICP. I is an igloo. And that one is actually semi helpful. I think you and I talked about this a little bit for Jay County, and it hasn't been particularly helpful. But nevertheless, with the BEAD build out, if service gets that much closer to your house, it'll become, infinitely more attractive for the Okra ICP program to sort of build out that last mile to your house. So essentially, what it is if you see a neighbor has internet service, but your household being a couple blocks away doesn't, you can apply to the ICP, and Okra will sort of vet your application, talk to providers on what they can do, and the hope is that they will be able to use ICP money to build that sort of connection to your household that's right next to what they already serve.
Thank you for having me in Jay County again, or well, not really in Jay County, but having me online to speak to you in Jay County. And thank you for talking to me about this. I think it's a really important topic that needs to be discussed and that people need to be aware of. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I enjoy the conversations both on the camera and off. And so looking forward to the next one here, maybe in the next month or so.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Hopefully another one in August and in person this time.
Yes, no more technical difficulties.
Yes, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Gary, and have a great day.
Yeah, you too. Bye.
Bye-bye.